Hi everyone, Magnus here, and today's video I'm going to be covering some straightforward black plans in the Accelerated Dragon. This is something that you should be able to employ at pretty much all levels. I really think it's a nice and simple system to learn. There's lots of tricks in it for beginner levels, and there's also it's concretely good all the way up to the high levels as well. So I'm just going to get started. So we start with pawn to e4 for white. This is an opening for black, and it starts off with the Sicilian with pawn to c5, and white can either go knight to f3 here. White often goes knight to c3 for the closed Sicilian. I find that this is a lot more common at higher levels. People are avoiding the mainline Sicilians. Also, white can play pawn to c3, but we're not going to cover pawn to c3 in this video because that's a whole nother topic. And other than that, sometimes white plays bishop c4 or some other fairly bad move. If they try to play like the Italian game, this just isn't that good against the Sicilian. You'll just play pawn to e6, for example. You'll try and play d5 very quickly. So they play knight c3 if they think they're playing the Vienna. You can just go knight c6, knight f3, knight f6, and if they castle, you can always sack and go for the center fork trick, like that. And if they were to defend against that, like with pawn d3, then you can just play pawn d5, take, take, they get the bishop out. You can go bishop e7, bishop e6, castles, and get a good game. But that's not the main topic for the video. Primarily, this video is looking at the Accelerated Dragon, which comes with knight to f3. You should go knight to c6 here, fighting for the center with your c pawn and your knight. And if they go pawn d4, which is the most common move, you can take, and Accelerated Dragon here is pawn to g6. And the point is you're going to go bishop g7 and attack this knight, and try and get a trade, and then you'll play knight to f6, castle your king, and try to execute this d5 pawn push. Okay, so often people will play knight to c3 here. You can develop your bishop to target the knight. Let's say they go bishop to e3 guarding the knight. You go knight to f6 attacking the pawn. And let's say they play pawn to f3. Pawn f3 is actually a mistake, but it's by far one of the most common moves at pretty much under 2000, I would say. Loads of people going pawn f3, castles, and either queen d2 or bishop c4. I'll show both of these quickly. Queen d2, you can execute pawn d5, and let's say long castles, you will take here in center. They often take the knight, you will trade queens, then you will take the knight, and you can attack the bishop here with knight to g4, a very common move. And the problem here for white is that their bishop will get kicked off this diagonal very often, like this, and then you get to win the rook with this skewer. So that's a nice trap there. And other than that, they can sometimes take early, in which case you can take back. And if they castle here, which is less likely, most people are going pawn e5, but then you can always go knight to d7, let's say castles. Oh wait, no, not castles, sorry. They'll go f4 to defend the pawn. You go e6 if they castle. Then you can play for f6 or c5. I think c5 is slightly more accurate here because pawn c5 threatens the fork in the center. Let's say they play bishop to f2, getting out of the fork. You can go for d4 anyway. And after this move, knight to b5, there's actually a trap. I'm trying to remember it. I think the move is actually bishop to h6, which is very strong. And the point is that they cannot defend this e-pawn because let's say the rook moves to guard the pawn in the center. Now they're wait, what is it? Let me just check for a second. Okay, apparently the move is pawn to a6, and if the knight goes into d6 here, then yeah, okay, this is it. Yes, you now can sack, and the point is that if the rook takes the knight, then you can take their. But this is quite a deep trap. This is not really that necessary. What's important here is that you know the key plan against this setup with f4 and e5, that you'll go c5, d4, try and get this fork here, and this bishop h6 move is also a nice one to go after this pawn. And if you can try and come up with some plans based around that, you'll do very well. Alternatively to queen d2, as I was discussing, bishop c4 can be played, but after bishop c4, queen b6 is very strong, and the point is that you're now attacking, putting some pressure on this knight and bishop, and also attacking this pawn. Bishop to b3 is a very common move to try and block the queen's attack of the pawn, but this walks into knight takes in the center, adding an attacker with the bishop, the knight, and the queen. As you can see, the Sicilian is coming to life here. And let's say they take back, you can play bishop takes or knight takes. I like bishop takes because it's more simple, you're not going into a pin, and they take back, and you get a very nice and easy pawn up game. Okay, so now let's also look at, other than bishop to e3, it's quite common that we can get knight takes on c6 here. You can take back with the b pawn, and white will probably just play either bishop e2, bishop e3, doesn't really matter. Your plan will be the same. You're going to play knight f6 castle and pawn d5. This really isn't a very testing system. Sometimes you can go a5 to get your bishop out via a6. That can be an idea, but most of the time you're just going to be playing standard moves in the center like this and get the bishop out. Alternatively, after g6 immediately, people often take on c6, and after you take back with your pawn here, taking towards the center, according to principles, they often go queen d4 to attack your rook in the corner. But after this move, you can actually play knight here to f6, blocking the queen. They often kick you out, you go here, and if they play this move, it looks pretty good for white, but actually this position is just bad for white because you're going to get pawn to e5 very quickly. This bishop comes to life. I'll give one example where they develop the knight. You can play pawn e5. Let's say put the queen on the side, and you can immediately take the knight here and play bishop g7, bishop e7, or bishop to e6. I like the move bishop to e6. The point being that you don't want their bishop to develop to c4. You go bishop e7, castles, f5, put the pawn here, or bishop g7, going for the same idea. And black just gets a very nice game. Better pawn structure, better central control. This is really not a threatening line for white. Some final moves that I thought might be worth covering. Let's say instead of knight to f3, let's say they play knight to c3. You can still go knight c6, and let's say they're playing some anti-Sicilian, like g6, g3, sorry. You'll just go for the same setup, very close to the same setup. Let's say they put their knight here. Other than that, if they're playing a closed Sicilian, which means they've not played pawn d4, that means that you can go e6, knight ge7, and then play either pawn d5 or pawn d6, like this. So let's say closed Sicilian. You might want to play pawn d6 here. And your ideas are going to be to play b6, bishop to b7, put the knight in the center, get some trades, and try and eventually expand with pawn b4 on the queen side. Sometimes you'll play pawn f5 if they play f4. And in general, I think black does very, very well in these positions. And we just have a nice, strong bishop pressuring their queen side. Okay. I think that about covers my introduction for the Accelerated Dragon Sicilian. There is obviously a lot more that you could learn in this opening, but I feel like these lines that I've showed you just about get the gist of what the positions you should be trying to get are. And yeah, So I think I'm going to go and try and play a game now on chess.com. Let's see if I can get a 3-minute blitz game, and I'll try and show you some of the ideas if I can get black, and hopefully my opponent will actually play e4. That's always the trouble when you're trying to do this. Okay. Okay, we have a 300 from Japan for the video. Good luck, Shadow PT4. Okay, so this is the start of the opening. I'm targeting this pawn. Okay, so you might see like a lot of somewhat strange moves. This isn't something to be concerned about. Let's just play the standard dragon stuff. Going for this pawn. Take the free pawn. Try and develop the knight. That bishop's under fire. Okay, let's attack the bishop in the center. Probably they'll go back to f3. If they go back, probably just develop the knight. Could play this as well, attacking that knight there. H6 becomes an idea. That's an interesting move. That is a bold move. Counter-attacking. I mean, I'm winning another pawn, so I can just trade queens and take this pawn here. Not overthink it. Actually, I'm not winning another pawn, but whatever. Pawn up still. They're going to take here. So I'm taking on e5. If they take back in the center, I can go b6, bishop b7, try and pressure down this diagonal. Takes here. Okay. Let's just develop the knight. Castles, bring the rook to the middle. Try and develop this bishop, bring the other rook. Castles. Try and bring the rook. Give a check. This bishop can drop back to c7. Yep, looks good. Can go b5, bishop b7. This knight is nicely restricted by this bishop here. Okay, that's a free knight. Putting some pressure on this pawn. Let's pin fork. Let's take the free knight. Try and attack down the middle. Nice. Okay, I think that'll do it for this episode. If you enjoyed, please consider liking, subscribing. I will be uploading more videos of this kind soon. And yeah, see you next time. Bye.